Turin, Italy, January 3, 1889, 9:15 in the morning. A man walks across Piazza Carlo Alberto, 54 years old, gray coat worn at the elbows, round spectacles sliding down his nose. He walks to buy bread as he has every morning for 4 months. The same route, the same bakery, the same polite nod to the baker's wife who thinks he is a retired schoolmaster. But this morning he stops. In the center of the square, a coachman beats his horse. The animal cannot move. The load is too heavy. The whip falls. Again. Again. The crack of leather on flesh echoes between the arcades. The man rushes forward. No thought, pure instinct. He pushes the coachman aside, throws his arms around the horse's neck, and begins to weep. Not quiet tears, violent, body-shaking sobs. People gather. He is drunk, someone says. No, mad, says another. 2 men carry him home, his body limp, his eyes seeing nothing. The landlord lays him on the bed. He lies there, whispering words no one understands. He will never speak coherently again. 11 years as a body without mind. A genius erased. A philosopher silenced. What broke him? Why this moment shattered him completely? To understand the end, we must return to the beginning, to a pastor's house in Prussia, to a boy who lost his father too soon, to a man who loved too much and was loved too little, to a sister who saved his legacy and destroyed it, to the moment when trying to be more than human revealed he was nothing but. This is the story of Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who declared God dead, the man who embraced a horse and lost his mind, the genius whose walking stick ended in Adolf Hitler's hands. Rurken, Prussia, October 15, 1844. A son is born to Pastor Karl Ludwig Nietzsche and his wife Franziska. They name him Friedrich Wilhelm, after the Prussian king who shares his birthday. In the pastor's house, the church organ plays Bach. The father, talented at the keys, performs for his infant son. The boy's first memories: his father's hands on the organ, the deep resonance of pipes, the smell of incense and old wood. Sunday mornings when villagers filled the pews and his father spoke of God's mercy. The child believed his father could speak to God directly, that their house stood closer to heaven than others. 1848. Everything changes. The father falls ill. Doctors call it softening of the brain. Most likely a tumor. 4-year-old Friedrich watches the strongest man in his world become weak, confused, unable to recognize his own son. One afternoon, the boy enters his father's bedroom. The smell of sickness hangs heavy. "Papa, will you play Bach for me?" Karl Ludwig turns his head slowly. His eyes search for something they cannot find. Then, without warning, he smiles. His fingers move in the air, pressing invisible keys, playing music only he can hear. Franziska takes the boy's hand. "Come, Friedrich, let Papa rest." But he was playing. No, child, he was not. The boy learns, then, what he will spend his life trying to unlearn. The people we love most can disappear while still breathing. July 30, 1849. Karl Ludwig dies, 36 years old. Within months, Friedrich's younger brother Joseph dies as well. 2 funerals, 2 graves side by side in the Rurken cemetery. The boy is 5 years old. Years later he will write, "My father died young. I fear I will repeat his fate." He will, with a 20-year delay. Naumburg, 1850. The family moves to the city. 5 women now: Mother Franziska, Sister Elizabeth, 2 aunts, grandmother. Not a single man. The boy grows in a house of black dresses and whispered prayers. His mother, 17 years younger than her dead husband, becomes harder, more pious, more silent. Elizabeth, 2 years younger, attaches to her brother with fierce intensity. She follows him everywhere, reads his notebooks without permission, tells their mother his secrets. When he makes friends, she finds ways to drive them away. One evening, Friedrich writes poetry in his room, 12 years old. The door bursts open. "Who is she?" Elizabeth demands. Who is who? The girl you are writing about. I saw you looking at her after church. Lisa, it is just a poem, an exercise. Show me. She grabs for the notebook. He pulls it away. No. Then I will tell Mama you have been reading forbidden books, the French novels hidden under your bed. He stares at his sister. Something passes between them, a recognition. She has power and she knows it. He can resist, but the cost will be high. He hands her the notebook. She reads, laughs, runs downstairs. Within the hour, his mother questions him about inappropriate attachments. The poem is burned. He does not know this pattern will repeat for 40 years, that his sister will destroy every relationship he builds, that she will outlive him and claim his legacy, that she will burn his true thoughts and write new ones in his name. But that betrayal lies ahead. For now he is just a boy who learns. Love always has conditions. Trust always has limits. Family is the first prison. 1858. Escape arrives. The elite Florida boarding school accepts him. 6 years among the best students in Prussia. Latin, Greek, ancient philosophy. He excels. Teachers call him the little pastor, assuming he will follow his father's path. At 14, he reads Schopenhauer, The World as Will and Representation. The words hit like lightning. Life is suffering. The world is not rational. God is not watching. Redemption is illusion. He sits in the school library, the book open on his lap, and understands. His father did not go to heaven. There is no heaven. Death is simply darkness. All the prayers, all the hymns, all the sermons were attempts to deny this simple, terrible truth. He closes the book. When he opens it again, he is no longer his father's son. He is something else, something that will eventually have no name. But first, catastrophe and revelation. 1868. A fall from a horse during military training. His head strikes the ground. For hours he cannot remember his name. The injury seems minor. It is not. Decades later, doctors will wonder if this blow began the process that ends in Turin. Then 1870, the Franco-Prussian War. He volunteers as a medical orderly. Idealism and adventure. Instead, diphtheria and dysentery. He returns to Basel broken. Migraines begin. Vision problems. Stomach issues that will torture him for life. But also, Basel brings him a professorship at 24, the youngest professor in the university's history, before even completing his doctorate, a genius recognized. And a meeting that will define the next decade. Leipzig, November 8, 1868, evening at the home of Richard Wagner's sister. The 24-year-old scholar arrives nervous. In the drawing room, the 55-year-old composer, already legendary. Richard Wagner, creator of new music, revolutionary of art. You study the Greeks. Wagner's voice fills the room. Yes, Herr Wagner, I am writing about. The Greeks understood tragedy, do you? The young man straightens. Tragedy is when the hero sees his fate clearly and walks toward it with open eyes. Wagner slaps the table. Exactly. Finally, someone who understands. You must visit me, Tribschen, my villa on Lake Lucerne. We will discuss tragedy. The young professor does not know. This invitation will become both paradise and poison. Tribschen, 1869–72. Heaven on earth for a lonely philosopher. Wagner's villa overlooks the lake. Mountains in the distance. Music always playing. Conversations about art, philosophy, the future of German culture. And Cosima Liszt, daughter of Franz Liszt, former wife of Hans von Bülow, now Wagner's lover and eventual wife, 33 years old, 24 years older than the professor, tall, severe, brilliant, terrifyingly efficient, someone will later write. The philosopher falls in love, hopelessly, silently. Christmas Day 1870, morning. Cosima wakes to music. On the villa staircase, 15 musicians play the Siegfried Idyll, Wagner's gift to her for her birthday. She weeps. Wagner holds her. The philosopher sits on the bottom step watching. He has brought a gift too, the manuscript of his first book, The Birth of Tragedy. But his gift is paper. Wagner's is music. There is no comparison. Later, Cosima opens the manuscript. "How beautiful, Professor. Richard, you must hear this." Wagner reads passages aloud that evening. Cosima listens with closed eyes. The philosopher realizes she is not listening to his words. She is listening to her husband's voice. He is merely the text. Wagner is the performance. The philosopher writes in his notebook that night, "To be loved, one must be heard. But when another's voice is louder, one becomes invisible." He does not know this invisibility will haunt him always. Lou Salome will see through him. His sister will speak over him. The Nazis will rewrite him. Even his madness will be misdiagnosed. But for now, he is young and ambitious. He publishes The Birth of Tragedy in 1872. Dedication: to Richard Wagner. Thesis: great art combines Apollonian form and Dionysian chaos. Wagner embodies this synthesis. Academic reviews are brutal, unscholarly, speculative, embarrassing. His career as a classical philologist ends before it begins. But Wagner is pleased. He has gained an apostle. The philosopher is happy. He belongs to something greater than himself. Until he does not. August 1876. Bayreuth, opening of Wagner's theater. The Ring Cycle premieres. Kings, composers, critics from across Europe attend. Wagner's triumph. The philosopher sits in the audience. First day fascinated, second day uneasy, third day horrified. He whispers to his friend Erwin Rohde, "Do you see what this is? Not tragedy, spectacle, not art, propaganda. Listen to the audience. They are not moved, they are inflamed. This is nationalism disguised as opera." Rohde shrugs. Everyone else seems transported. Everyone else is mistaken. The philosopher leaves Bayreuth early, claiming illness. The illness is real, but not physical. His idol has revealed feet of clay. Wagner is not the new Aeschylus. He is a showman using genius to sell German superiority. Worse comes in 1877. Wagner begins composing Parsifal, a Christian opera. The man who once rejected religion now embraces it for dramatic effect. The philosopher writes Human, All Too Human in 1878, a book against romanticism, against Wagner, though the name appears nowhere. Wagner recognizes himself. Fury follows. The Dirtiest Blow. Wagner writes to the philosopher's doctor, suggesting his former protege's health problems stem from unnatural excesses. Code for masturbation or homosexuality. The rumor spreads in academic circles. The philosopher learns of this from a mutual friend. He said, "What about me?" That your migraines might be self-inflicted through immoral habits. He violated medical confidence to spread this. I am sorry, Friedrich. The philosopher burns every letter Wagner ever sent him. He writes 2 books attacking Wagner by name, The Case of Wagner and Nietzsche contra Wagner. Quote, "Wagner is not music. Wagner is a disease." But privately to Cosima he writes differently, coded letters, reminiscences of Tribschen, hints that he still loves what they had. She never responds. He does not know, in his final madness he will write her one last time. "Ariadne, I love you, Dionysus." She will burn the letter. The philosopher is now 35. No wife, no children, no career, no idol, no home. Just migraines and a small pension from Basel University, which granted him early retirement due to illness. What remains? Philosophy and one last chance at human connection. Her name is Lou. Rome, April 1882. St. Peter's Basilica. The philosopher's friend Paul Ray brings a guest to meet him. Friedrich, this is Lou Salome. From Russia, she has read Schopenhauer. The philosopher looks up. He sees sharp cheekbones, direct blue eyes, no coquetry, 21 years old, dressed simply. No jewelry, hair pulled back severely. You have read Schopenhauer. He expects the usual answer, a little. Twice. Lou's voice is clear, unaccented German, the first time to understand, the second time to disagree. The philosopher blinks. In his entire life, no woman has spoken to him this way. As an equal, no reverence, no submission, pure intellectual challenge. You disagree with Schopenhauer. His pessimism is adolescent. Life is not fundamentally suffering. Life simply is. We create the suffering through interpretation. The philosopher feels something he has not felt since the early days with Wagner. Recognition. Someone who thinks like him. Better, someone who thinks beyond him. Within a week, Paul Ray conveys a message. The professor asks for Lou's hand in marriage. Lou's response: "Tell the professor I do not marry anyone ever, but I will be his friend and student." The philosopher accepts. He has no choice. Friendship with Lou is better than nothing. But Paul Ray is also in love with Lou, and Lou knows it. She proposes an idea. The three of them will live together. A philosophical commune, 3 minds, no romance, no marriage, pure intellectual collaboration. We will rent a house, Lou explains, Paris or Vienna. We study together, learn from each other. No conventional relationships, no societal expectations. What will people say? Ray asks. Lou shrugs. What do I care? If we three understand the arrangement, others' opinions are irrelevant. The philosopher agrees immediately. He tells himself this is pure philosophy, practical amor fati, acceptance of what is possible rather than mourning what is not. He is lying to himself. He wants more. He wants Lou, not as a student, as a wife, as salvation from the loneliness that has eaten him since childhood. May 1882, Lucerne, Switzerland. Lou suggests they take a photograph to commemorate their trinity. She has seen a toy cart in a shop window. We should stage something amusing, she says, to mock bourgeois expectations. They rent the cart and go to a photography studio. Lou climbs in, picks up a riding whip from the photographer's props. You two, she points at the philosopher and Ray, stand at the shafts, like horses. They obey. The philosopher thinks this is sophisticated irony, a statement about gender and power. He smiles for the camera. The flash, the image captured. He does not know this photograph will haunt him, that strangers will see it and think him weak. That 7 years later he will write, "You are going to women. Do not forget the whip," as if rewriting this humiliation. That historians will debate whether he was a misogynist or simply a man who never recovered from public emasculation. But for now he is happy. Lou is with him. The Trinity exists. Life has possibility again. His sister has other plans. Teutoburg, Thuringian Forest, July through August 1882. The philosopher rents rooms for Lou and himself in a small village. Elizabeth arrives uninvited as chaperone. Their mother Franziska comes occasionally, uncomfortable with the entire arrangement. Long days. The philosopher and Lou walk through forests. He explains his newest idea, eternal recurrence. What if time is circular? What if every moment repeats infinitely? Could you say yes to that? Could you embrace your life so completely that you would live it again, exactly the same forever? Lou challenges him. But if time is truly circular, there is no progress, no improvement, no meaning. Exactly. Meaning is what we create through affirmation, not what we discover through progress. They walk, they talk, they argue. Lou takes notes. The philosopher feels alive in a way he has not since Tribschen. Elizabeth watches from the house. One evening, Lou and the philosopher sit on the terrace, discussing Spinoza's concept of God as nature. Elizabeth emerges with tea. It is late, time to retire. Lou does not look up from her notebook. We are in the middle of a discussion. My brother needs rest. He is unwell. Then he should rest. I am not his nurse. I am his colleague. Elizabeth sets down the tray with force. You are a guest in this house, and guests observe propriety. Lou looks at Elizabeth directly, cold blue eyes meeting angry brown. I observe reason. If you prefer propriety, perhaps you should find other company. Elizabeth leaves. The philosopher sits frozen. No one has ever stood up to his sister like this. He feels gratitude and terror in equal measure. That night, Elizabeth writes letters. To Lou's mother in St. Petersburg. Your daughter plans to cohabit with 2 men without marriage. The scandal is spreading. You must intervene. To Paul Ray's mother. Your son participates in immoral arrangements. His reputation is destroyed. To Franziska. This Russian woman is corrupting Friedrich. She mocks our faith. She dresses immodestly. She seeks to destroy our family. The philosopher in these same weeks proposes marriage to Lou twice more. Twice more she refuses. Why? He asks during one walk. We think alike, we work well together. That is exactly why marriage would ruin it. Marriage creates ownership. I will not be owned. But marriage could give us freedom. Together we could. Friedrich, Lou stops walking. I am saying no. I will continue saying no. If you cannot accept my friendship without demanding more, then we should end this now. He falls silent. Terror wins. He will accept anything to keep her near. August ends. The Trinity makes plans. They will meet again in Leipzig in October, then to Paris. The philosophical commune will begin. The philosopher does not know. Lou and Paul Ray have been exchanging letters, private letters. The plan is changing. The Trinity is becoming a pair. October, Leipzig. The philosopher arrives at the boarding house where Lou and Ray are staying. He climbs the stairs, opens the door without knocking as friends do. Lou and Paul sit close on the sofa, too close. Lou laughs at something Paul said, a laugh the philosopher has never heard her make. Intimate, warm. They look up startled. Friedrich, we did not expect you until tomorrow. Clearly, the philosopher stands in the doorway. What have you decided without me? Silence, Paul stands. Nothing has been decided. Do not lie to me, Paul. I see it. You have chosen, both of you. Lou meets his eyes. No apology, no shame. We are going to live together, Paul and I, alone. What about our plan, the 3 of us? That plan was unrealistic. You know this. Unrealistic. We spent the summer. You spent the summer hoping I would change my mind about marriage. I did not. I will not. Paul accepts this. He wants what I want, an intellectual partnership. Can you say the same? The philosopher cannot speak. She is right. He wanted more. He always wanted more, and now he has nothing. He leaves Leipzig that night, does not say goodbye, takes the train to Genoa, rents a small room, stares at the Mediterranean for hours. The letters begin. To Lou, what sin did I commit? How did I fail you? To Paul Ray, you betrayed our friendship. I will never forgive this. To his sister Elizabeth, you were right about her. I should have listened. This last is a lie. Elizabeth was not right, but the philosopher needs someone to blame besides himself. His sister is convenient, and she will never let him forget he said this. Lou writes back once, you did not fail me, Friedrich. You failed yourself. You could not accept what I offered because you wanted something I cannot give anyone. Learn to love without possession. Then you will be free. He burns the letter, not because he is angry, because she is right, and being right makes it worse. Winter 1882–83, Rapallo, Italy, a small boarding house. The philosopher rents a room overlooking the sea, migraines every other day, insomnia. He takes long doses of chloral hydrate to sleep, considers drowning himself, decides against it. Too theatrical, too final. Instead, he writes, 10 days in January. He barely eats, barely sleeps, the words pour out. Thus spoke Zarathustra, Part 1. When Zarathustra was 30 years old, he left his home and the lake of his home and went into the mountains. There he enjoyed his spirit and his solitude, and for 10 years did not tire of it. A prophet who leaves humanity behind, who overcomes the need for others, who creates his own values, who says yes to fate without regret. Everything the philosopher is not, everything he wishes he were. And that phrase, the one that will make him infamous, "You are going to women, do not forget the whip." Is this revenge? Is this overcompensation? Or is this simply honesty, the admission that in the photograph Lou held the whip, and he never recovered? The book sells 40 copies in a year. His publisher refuses to print more. The philosopher pays for private editions, sends copies to friends, most never respond. But he keeps writing. Parts 2, 3, 4 of Zarathustra, each one more radical, more isolated, more desperate. God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. The words that will echo for a century. But in 1883, in a cheap Italian boarding house, they are just the cry of a lonely man who lost the last person who understood him. He does not know Lou will become one of the great psychoanalysts of the 20th century, a colleague of Freud, author of books on Nietzsche, Rilke, female sexuality. She will marry someone else, take lovers, live exactly as she wished. She will write in her memoir, "Friedrich was a brilliant mind trapped in neediness. I could not save him from himself." And Paul Ray, he will live with Lou for several years, then drift apart. He will die in 1801 falling from a mountain. Accident or suicide, no one knows. The philosopher will already be mad. He will never know his rival is dead. But these futures are hidden. For now there is only winter, only Rapallo, only the words on the page and the knowledge that no one is reading them. The philosopher tries something new. He buys a Hansen writing ball, one of the first typewriters in the world. His eyes are so weak he can barely see handwriting. The machine has a brass hemisphere with keys radiating out. He types by touch. His friends notice, his style changes, shorter sentences, more aphoristic, less flowing prose, more hammer blows. He writes to one friend, "Our writing tools work on our thoughts." He does not know. Scholars will later debate whether his philosophy became more fragmented because of the typewriter, or whether his fragmenting mind needed the typewriter. 1879, age 35. He resigns his professorship at Basel, chronic illness, migraines 200 days per year, near blindness, vomiting after meals. The university grants him a pension, 3,000 francs annually, enough to survive in cheap boarding houses, not enough to thrive. The next 10 years, constant movement, chasing the right climate, Genoa in winter, Sils Maria in summer, Nice in autumn, Venice briefly, Turin finally. He tries once to abandon philosophy entirely. 1884. He studies botany, thinks he might become a gardener, something simple, something that does not require genius or recognition, just soil and sun and growing things. He buys seeds, plants them in pots on his boarding house balcony. His hands shake too much. His vision cannot distinguish the seedlings from weeds. Everything dies. He returns to writing. No one reads his books. Beyond Good and Evil in 1886, 300 copies printed, 70 sold in the first year. On the Genealogy of Morals in 1887, slightly better but still obscure. He writes to his friend Franz Overbeck, "Yesterday I walked into a bookshop in Zurich. I asked the owner, 'Do you carry Nietzsche?' He said, 'Who is that?' I bought a book by Emerson and left. I did not tell him I was asking about my own books." But the rioting continues, must continue. What else does he have? 1888. Turin, something changes. He feels energized, clear, powerful. He writes at incredible speed. Twilight of the Idols, The Antichrist, Ex Homo, 4 books in 6 months. The last, Ex Homo, is autobiography with chapter titles like Why I Am So Wise, Why I Am So Clever, Why I Write Such Good Books, Why I Am a Destiny. Is this megalomania or accurate prophecy? In 40 years, his name will be invoked by the Nazis. His books will be taught in every university. His ideas will shape modern philosophy, but he will not know any of this. December 31st, 1888. He writes his last coherent letter to Cosima Wagner. He does not mention Wagner. He writes about art, truth, their time, inscription. He signs it strangely, Dionysus. The next morning he wakes, dresses, walks to the piazza for bread. He sees a horse. The horse stands in the center of Piazza Carlo Alberto, brown, old, ribs visible through patchy coat. The cart behind it is loaded with furniture. Too much weight. The animal cannot move. The coachman yells in Italian, strikes the horse with his whip, once, twice. The horse flinches but does not step forward, cannot step forward. The philosopher stops. He has seen this before, not literally, metaphorically. The photograph in Lucerne, himself in the harness, Lou with the whip. The humiliation he transformed into philosophy. But this is not metaphor. This is real. The horse is real. The suffering is real. The whip falls again. The philosopher does not think. He runs, pushes past the coachman, throws his arms around the horse's neck, presses his face against the coarse hair, and sobs. Not quiet crying, violent, uncontrollable weeping. His body shakes. Sounds come from his throat that are not quite human. A crowd gathers. The coachman shouts at him in Italian. The philosopher does not hear. He clings to the horse. The animal stands still, confused by this embrace. 2 men from a nearby cafe recognize him. The quiet German who eats breakfast there. They pull him away gently. His landlord, David Fino, is summoned. Together they carry the philosopher home. Via Carlo Alberto, number 6, 3rd floor. They lay him on his bed. He stares at the ceiling. His lips move. Fino leans close. The words make no sense. German mixed with Latin mixed with sounds that are not words at all. Should I fetch a doctor? One of the cafe men asks. Wait, Fino says, perhaps he is drunk. They wait. The philosopher does not improve. He laughs suddenly, then cries, then sings a fragment of something operatic, then falls silent. That afternoon he picks up a pen, begins writing letters. Later, these will be called the letters of madness. To Cosima Wagner, Ariadne, I love you, Dionysus. To King Umberto of Italy, my beloved Umberto, it is more pleasant to be professor of Basel than God, but I did not dare push my egoism so far as to refrain on its account from the creation of the world. To Jacob Burckhardt, the historian, in the end I would much rather be a Basel professor than God, but I have not ventured to carry my private egoism so far as to omit creating the world on his account. To his friend Franz Overbeck, come immediately. I am Thomas Aquinas and Napoleon at once, have all anti-Semites shot. He signs them variously, Dionysus, the crucified one, Nietzsche Caesar. Burckhardt receives his letter first, reads it, immediately writes to Overbeck in Basel, our friend Nietzsche appears to have gone mad, you must go to him. January 7, 1889. Overbeck arrives in Turin 6 days after the collapse. He finds his friend lying on the sofa in Fino's apartment. The philosopher is singing Wagnerian opera fragments, Siegfried, Tristan. Friedrich, it is France. The philosopher turns his head, smiles brilliantly. You came, did you bring the champagne? We must celebrate. Celebrate what? My victory. I have killed God. I have revalued all values. The world will never be the same. Overbeck's heart sinks. He has known this man for 20 years. This is not eccentricity. This is not exhaustion. This is complete mental collapse. Friedrich, you need to come with me. Back to Basel. There are doctors. The philosopher leaps up, embraces Overbeck violently. Of course, to Basel, to everywhere, I must teach humanity. They are waiting for me. Then abruptly he collapses back onto the sofa, begins weeping. They beat the horse, did you see? They beat the horse and no one stopped them. Only me, only I saw. Overbeck makes arrangements. January 9th they board the train. The philosopher alternates between euphoria and despair. He sings, he cries, he demands wine, he stares out the window for hours without blinking. At the Basel station, Overbeck brings him to a private clinic. The doctors examine him. Initial diagnosis, complete nervous collapse. Possible causes, overwork, poor diet, medications. The philosopher is transferred to a psychiatric clinic in Jena. Dr. Otto Binswanger takes charge. After weeks of observation, the official diagnosis, progressive paralysis, the standard term for tertiary syphilis. But the philosopher was never treated for syphilis. There is no record of primary or secondary infection. His symptoms do not match the usual progression. Modern researchers will later conclude, most likely a brain tumor, meningioma, or a genetic neurological disease called CADASIL. But in 1889, progressive paralysis is the diagnosis for any unexplained mental deterioration in a male patient. The clinic records document his decline. January alternates between mania and depression, believes he is various historical figures. February, violent episodes, must be restrained. March, gradual quieting. By April, he sits in silence for hours. May 1889. His mother Franziska travels from Naumburg to Jena. She is 63 years old. She has not seen her son since before Turin. The doctor leads her to the day room. Her son sits in a chair by the window, staring at nothing. Friedrich. He does not respond, does not turn. She sits beside him, takes his hand. It is limp in hers. Friedrich, it is Mama. I have come to take you home. No response. She stays for an hour, talks to him about Naumburg, about the garden, about his childhood. His face does not change. His eyes do not focus. But when she stands to leave, his hand tightens on hers, just for a moment, then releases. She tells Dr. Binswanger, I will care for him at home. Frau Nietzsche, he requires constant supervision. He can be violent. He is my son, he will come home. May 18, 1889. Friedrich Nietzsche returns to Naumburg, to the house of widows where he grew up. His mother has prepared the ground floor room, bars on the windows, heavy furniture that cannot be moved. The routine begins. She wakes him, dresses him, feeds him, walks him in the garden, bathes him, puts him to bed, every day the same. Sometimes he speaks, single words, water, light, no, never sentences, never conversation. Sometimes he plays piano, disconnected chords, fragments of melodies that almost cohere, then dissolve. Sometimes he laughs for no reason. Sometimes he cries. Most often he simply sits, his mind somewhere unreachable. Old friends visit. Professor Overbeck comes twice a year. He reads passages from Thus Spoke Zarathustra aloud. The philosopher does not react. No recognition, no interest. Does he understand anything? Overbeck asks Franziska. I do not know, but I speak to him as if he does. What else can a mother do? Peter Gast, his former student and editor, visits in 1891. He brings flowers, reads from the philosopher's letters, reminds him of their time in Venice. The philosopher looks at him, through him. Gast leaves weeping. Elizabeth, meanwhile, is in Paraguay. Her colony project with her husband Bernhard Förster is collapsing. The pure German settlers are fleeing. Disease, bankruptcy, isolation. The dream of an Aryan paradise in the jungle is revealed as delusion. 1889 June. Forster realizes the colony is doomed. Debts are overwhelming. His reputation in Germany is destroyed. On June 3rd, he takes strychnine. Death is agonizing, takes hours. Elizabeth finds him, calls it heart failure in her letters. Later the truth emerges, suicide. She remains in Paraguay another 2 years, trying to salvage something, anything. She fails. 1893 she returns to Germany, 36 years old, widowed, penniless, bitter. She goes to Naumburg, sees her brother for the first time since the collapse. He sits in his chair, stares at nothing. Drool runs down his chin. Franziska wipes it away. "How long has he been like this?" Elizabeth asks. 4 years now. He has not spoken a full sentence since Gina. Elizabeth looks at her brother, the brilliant mind, the genius she worshipped and resented, reduced to this. But Elizabeth is her father's daughter. She sees opportunity where others see tragedy. "Mama, let me help. You are too old for this burden." "I manage." "But you should not have to. He is my brother too." Franziska, exhausted, agrees. Elizabeth begins visiting daily, helps with feeding, bathing, walking. But she also enters his study, his papers, his manuscripts, his letters, everything he wrote and never published. She finds notebooks, hundreds of pages of fragments, ideas, aphorisms, plans for books he never completed. She begins reading, begins selecting, begins editing. April 20th, 1897. Franziska has a stroke, dies in her sleep, 71 years old. She has cared for her son for 8 years, never complained, never abandoned him. The philosopher sits in the next room. He does not know his mother is dead. He rocks slightly in his chair, hums something tuneless. Elizabeth arranges the funeral, returns to Naumburg afterward, tells her brother, "Mama is gone. You will come live with me now." He does not respond, does not resist when she packs his belongings, does not react when she moves him to Weimar. Weimar, a small house. Elizabeth calls it the Nietzsche archive. One room for her brother, the others for his papers which she is organizing, cataloging, preparing for publication. She hires a nurse, a strong young woman who can lift him, change him, control him if he becomes agitated. Elizabeth focuses on the papers. She creates a book from his fragments, calls it The Will to Power, presents it as his masterwork, his final philosophy, but the book is her creation. She selects passages that support her views, omits passages that contradict them, changes phrases, adds transitions, invents contexts. She removes all criticism of anti-Semitism, removes his hatred of German nationalism, removes his praise of Jewish intellectuals, removes letters where he called Forster a racist fool. She adds quotes from Count Gobineau about racial purity, adds interpretations suggesting the Übermensch is Aryan, adds context suggesting his philosophy supports German supremacy. In 1899, she publishes the first edition. It sells well, better than anything he published in life. Critics who ignored him now praise this final work. The philosopher sits upstairs. A nurse feeds him soup. He swallows mechanically. His eyes see nothing. 1899 turns to 1900. Winter in Weimar. The philosopher develops pneumonia. His lungs, never strong, cannot fight the infection. Elizabeth calls doctors. They examine him, say there is nothing to do. His body is shutting down, age 55, but he has not been truly alive for 11 years. August 20th, 1900. The philosopher's breathing becomes labored, irregular. The nurse sends for Elizabeth. She sits beside his bed, takes his hand. He does not squeeze back, has not squeezed back in 11 years. "You are a genius, Friedrich. The world will know, I promise you." Does he hear? Does he understand? His face shows nothing. August 25, 1900. Morning, the breathing stops. Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche is dead. Born October 15, 1844. Died August 25, 1900. 55 years, 10 months, 10 days. Cause of death, pneumonia and stroke. But the real cause, his brain destroyed itself 11 years earlier. Everything since has been aftermath. Elizabeth arranges a grand funeral, returns his body to Rurken, buries him next to his father and brother. The pastor's son returns to the pastor's cemetery. The man who declared God dead is buried in consecrated ground. Reporters attend, photographers. The funeral is covered in newspapers. In life he was unknown. In death he becomes newsworthy because his sister is already building his fame. The will, everything to Elizabeth, all papers, all rights, all control. Friends protest. Peter Gast knows the texts are being falsified. Overbeck suspects Elizabeth is changing her brother's words. They write letters to publishers, to newspapers. No one listens. Elizabeth has legal authority. She is the keeper of his legacy. And she will keep it for 35 more years, long enough to meet Adolf Hitler, long enough to give him her brother's walking stick, long enough to see the philosopher who hated nationalism become the Nazis' favorite thinker. But that corruption lies ahead. For now there is only Rurken, the cemetery, the grave next to his father's, the philosopher finally silenced. What remains? Words on paper, ideas that will outlive everyone who knew him, a philosophy of strength written by a man whose body betrayed him, a call to overcome humanity written by a man who never overcame his need to be loved. And questions that will haunt scholars for more than a century. What if Lou had said yes? What if Wagner had not betrayed him? What if his sister had never been born? What if the horse in Turin had not been beaten? Would he still have gone mad? Was the madness inevitable, coded in his brain from birth? Or was it the accumulation of rejections, each one a small death, until the final death in the piazza? The grave offers no answers, only the name on the stone, Friedrich Nietzsche, and dates and silence. Weimar 1900 to 1935, the Nietzsche Archive. Elizabeth transforms the small house into a shrine. Her brother's room is preserved exactly as it was, his chair, his desk, his books, but he is not there. He is buried in Rurken. Downstairs, Elizabeth works. She has appointed herself priestess of his legacy, curator, editor, interpreter. She decides what the world will know of Friedrich Nietzsche. The manuscripts spread across tables, notebooks, letters, published works, unpublished fragments, decades of thought. She begins the sorting. First, she removes anything that contradicts her worldview. Letters where he mocked Bernhard Förster's racism, passages praising Jewish intellectuals like Paul Rée and Heinrich Heine, fragments attacking German nationalism, criticisms of anti-Semitism. These she puts aside. Later, many will be destroyed. Others will be hidden in locked drawers. Some will not resurface until the 1960s. Second, she edits what remains, changes phrases, alters contexts. In one letter he wrote, "I am not a German, I am Polish." She changes it to, "I am not merely German, I am European." Small change, enormous difference. In notebooks he wrote, "The concept of racial purity is the great lie of our age." She omits the page. Later editions will never include it. She assembles the will to power from fragments, presents it as his final, complete philosophy, but scholars will later prove 60% is selectively quoted out of context, 20% is rearranged to change meaning, 20% is her own writing inserted between his sentences. 1902. The first commercial edition of The Will to Power appears. Reviews are positive. Nietzsche's masterwork finally revealed, writes one critic. A philosophy of strength for a strong Germany, writes another. Elizabeth is pleased. Her brother is finally receiving recognition. That the recognition is for ideas he would have rejected is irrelevant to her. She believes she understands him better than he understood himself. 1906. She establishes the official Nietzsche archive as a foundation. Wealthy donors contribute, German nationalists, conservatives, militarists, people who would have horrified her brother, but their money is useful. She gives lectures, appears in newspapers, presents herself as the only true interpreter of his work. Anyone who contradicts her is shut out. Publishers who want to release his texts must negotiate with her. She controls everything. Peter Gast continues to protest. He edited several of the philosopher's books during his lifetime. He knows what his friend actually believed. In 1908, Gast writes an open letter. Frau Förster Nietzsche has altered her brother's text to suit her own political views. The real Nietzsche condemned anti-Semitism. The real Nietzsche hated German nationalism. I was his friend and collaborator. I know what he believed. What is being published is a distortion. Elizabeth responds with lawyers, threatens to sue for defamation. Gast is poor, cannot afford a legal battle. He withdraws his accusation publicly but continues telling friends in private she is betraying him. Franz Overbeck, the philosopher's oldest friend, knows the truth as well. But Overbeck is old, ill, and tired. He dies in 1905. His papers contain letters documenting Elizabeth's falsifications, but they will not be examined for decades. The years pass. The archive grows. Elizabeth ages but remains energetic. She is relentless in promoting her version of her brother's philosophy, and the world begins to listen. 1914. World War begins. German soldiers carry "Thus spoke Zarathustra" in their packs. Officers quote the Übermensch in speeches. The philosopher who despised war becomes a symbol of German military strength. Elizabeth encourages this. She gives interviews supporting the war effort, sends copies of her brother's books to the front, writes articles explaining how his philosophy justifies German expansion. In 1918, Germany loses, but Elizabeth's campaign continues. The Weimar Republic is weak, chaotic. Many Germans feel humiliated. They seek strength. They seek meaning. Elizabeth offers them Nietzsche, refashioned as a prophet of German destiny. 1922. Benito Mussolini takes power in Italy. He writes Elizabeth a letter of admiration. Your brother is the philosopher of fascism. He understood that the strong must rule. Elizabeth, now 76 years old, is delighted. She frames the letter, hangs it in the archive, shows it to visitors as proof of her brother's importance. She does not notice or does not care that Mussolini's strength means violence, dictatorship, the crushing of dissent, things her brother opposed in his actual writings. 1925. Adolf Hitler publishes Mein Kampf. The book contains references to will, power, struggle, destiny. The language echoes Nietzsche, but Hitler never directly quotes him. The connection is atmospheric, not textual. Historians will later debate, did Hitler actually read Nietzsche? Evidence suggests he read excerpts, second-hand interpretations, possibly some of Zarathustra. But not deeply, not carefully. Hitler's ideology comes from racial theorists like Gobineau and Houston Stewart Chamberlain, not from the philosopher. But the association is made. The Nazis claim Nietzsche as their philosopher, and Elizabeth does not object. 1933. Hitler becomes chancellor. The Nazi state begins. Book burnings, persecution of Jews, suppression of free thought. Elizabeth is 87 years old, frail but mentally sharp. She writes to Nazi officials, offers the archive's resources, suggests her brother's philosophy should be taught in schools. The Nazis are interested. Nietzsche's language of power, struggle, overcoming is useful. They ignore his attacks on anti-Semitism. They ignore his praise of Jewish intellectuals. They take what is useful, discard the rest. November 1933. Hitler visits the archive. Photographs document the event. The Führer stands before the philosopher's bust, expression reverent. Elizabeth, tiny and elderly, stands beside him. She presents him with her brother's walking stick, a heavy wooden cane with a carved handle. Hitler accepts it, thanks her, poses for more photographs. The images appear in newspapers across Germany. Caption: The Führer honors Germany's greatest philosopher. Elizabeth is triumphant. Her brother is finally recognized as a genius. That this recognition comes from a regime founded on everything he opposed does not trouble her. She is old. She wants vindication before she dies. In her final interviews, she says, Friedrich always knew the strong would inherit the earth. He predicted the coming of a great leader. Now that leader is here. She does not understand, or refuses to understand. The great leader is overseeing the destruction of everything her brother valued: free thought, intellectual courage, individual autonomy, cosmopolitanism. November 8, 1935. Elizabeth Förster Nietzsche dies, age 89. She has outlived her brother by 35 years. She has controlled his legacy for those 35 years. Her funeral is a Nazi state occasion. High officials attend. Hitler sends a wreath. Newspapers call her the guardian of Nietzsche's flame. She is buried in Weimar with military honors. She dies believing she saved her brother from obscurity. She does not know she has condemned him to decades of misunderstanding. That after the war his name will be synonymous with Nazism. That philosophers will avoid teaching him. That students will assume he was a fascist. She does not know the damage she has done, and perhaps that is mercy. 1935 to 1945. The Nazi era reaches its peak and collapses. Nietzsche's books are standard texts in German schools. The Übermensch is taught as Aryan Superman. The will to power is taught as justification for conquest. In 1945, Allied forces defeat Germany. The concentration camps are liberated. 6 million Jews murdered, millions more dead in war. The Nazi ideology is revealed as monstrous. And Nietzsche's reputation collapses with it. Post-war Germany. The Nietzsche archive is closed. His books are removed from curricula. Philosophers avoid citing him. To reference Nietzsche is to invite suspicion. Was this thinker not Hitler's favorite? Did his philosophy not lead to Auschwitz? Some scholars try to protest. Karl Jaspers, the philosopher, publishes Nietzsche and Christianity in 1946. Argues that Nietzsche was misappropriated, that he actually opposed everything the Nazis represented. Few listen. The association is too strong. The photographs of Hitler with the walking stick are too damning. The Nazi editions of The Will to Power are too widely distributed. For 20 years, Nietzsche remains academic poison. But gradually change comes. 1950s. Italian scholar Giorgio Colli begins examining original manuscripts. What he finds shocks him: passages removed, context altered, meanings reversed. He writes, "What has been published as Nietzsche is often Elizabeth Förster Nietzsche's creation, not her brother's thought." 1960s. Colli and his colleague Mazzino Montanari begin publishing a critical edition. 15 years of work. They examine every manuscript, every letter, every notebook. They compare published versions to originals. The results are devastating. The Will to Power, as Elizabeth assembled it, a fraud. Of 505 published passages, only 60 are presented in proper context. 32 are cobbled together from fragments he had explicitly rejected. The rest are selectively edited to distort meaning. The scholars publish their findings. Slowly, the academic world takes notice. 1970s. Walter Kaufmann's translations appear in English. Kaufmann writes extensive footnotes explaining which passages are genuine, which are corrupted. He documents Elizabeth's distortions. proves that Nietzsche condemned anti-Semitism repeatedly and explicitly. Kaufman's edition becomes standard in universities. Professors begin teaching Nietzsche again. Students discover a thinker far more complex than the Nazi caricature. 1980 to 2000. The rehabilitation accelerates. Hundreds of scholarly books reassess his philosophy. Postmodern thinkers like Foucault and Derrida find inspiration in his perspectivism, his critique of absolute truth. Feminist scholars like Martha Nussbaum examine his treatment of women. Verdict: complicated. His statements about women are often misogynistic, but his relationships with actual women, Lou Salome especially, show respect for female intellect. The famous Whip quote, likely ironic reversal of his own humiliation, not sincere belief. Psychologists study his life, diagnose his collapse. The syphilis diagnosis is questioned. New evidence suggests brain tumor, Cadasal syndrome, or frontotemporal dementia. His madness was organic, not syphilitic. 2010. Comprehensive biography by Rudiger Safransky appears. Exhaustive research. Access to all manuscripts. Verdict: Nietzsche was the opposite of what the Nazis claimed. He was a critic of nationalism, an opponent of anti-Semitism, a champion of individual freedom against collective tyranny. 2026. 126 years after his death. His books are taught in every major university. His ideas are debated by political philosophers, ethicists, psychologists, literary critics. He is recognized as one of the most influential thinkers in Western philosophy. The rehabilitation is complete, but the damage Elizabeth caused remains visible. Ask an educated person about Nietzsche, and they often still say, was he not the Nazi philosopher? The association lingers like smoke. What would he think of this legacy? The man who wrote for an audience that did not yet exist, who predicted his ideas would be understood only in the future, who said, "Some are born posthumously." He was right. His real audience came after his death, but so did his greatest enemy, his sister. Return to Turin, January 3, 1889. Why did the horse break him? Modern psychology offers interpretations. The horse represented himself in harness from the Lucerne photograph. The horse was a symbol of all innocent suffering. The horse was the final straw after decades of accumulated pain. But perhaps the explanation is simpler. He saw an animal suffering needlessly. And unlike philosophy, unlike books, unlike ideas about the Übermensch, this suffering was immediate, real, undeniable. It demanded response, not analysis. For once he could not think his way out, could not transform pain into philosophy, could not write an aphorism about it. He could only feel, and feeling without the protective barrier of intellect destroyed him. The man who taught that suffering gives life meaning discovered that some suffering has no meaning. The man who taught amor fati discovered he could not accept this fate. The man who taught strength discovered he was weak. And in that discovery, perhaps, he became most human, most real, most himself. What remains today? Words on pages, ideas that continue to challenge, questions that have no final answers. Is there objective truth? He said no, only perspectives. Is morality universal? He said no, only interpretations serving power. Can we create our own values? He said yes, we must. Should we accept our fate? He said yes, amor fati, love of fate. Did he accept his own fate? The 11 years of silence suggest otherwise, unless the silence itself was the final acceptance, the ultimate letting go. We will never know. The man who wrote so much left his final years unwritten, not by choice, but perhaps that too is meaningful. Perhaps some experiences transcend language. Perhaps madness is the place where philosophy ends and being begins. His grave in Rurken remains simple, no monument, just a stone with his name and dates. Tourists visit occasionally. Philosophy students making pilgrimage, some leave flowers, some leave books, some leave notes. Thank you for your courage. The house in Weimar is now a museum. Visitors can see his room, his desk, his books. The walking stick Hitler held is displayed in a case, a reminder of how legacy can be stolen. But the books remain. Thus spoke Zarathustra, beyond good and evil, the genealogy of morals, twilight of the idols, ex homo. Read properly, without Elizabeth's distortions, they reveal a man struggling with fundamental questions. How do we live without God? How do we create meaning in a meaningless universe? How do we affirm life despite suffering? His answers may not be ours, his path may not be ours, but his questions remain urgent, perhaps more urgent now than in his lifetime. Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche, born October 15, 1844, died August 25, 1900, 55 years of life, 44 years of consciousness, 11 years of silence. He tried to become more than human and discovered he was irreducibly human. He tried to love without needing love and was destroyed by need. He tried to overcome suffering and was overcome by it. In all this he was not a Superman. He was a man, flawed, brilliant, vulnerable, courageous. A man who asked questions he could not answer. A man who embraced a horse and collapsed into silence. A man whose sister betrayed him and whose legacy survived the betrayal. Remember him not as the Nazis portrayed him, not as Elizabeth created him, but as he was, a philosopher who tried to live his ideas and paid the price for that attempt, a writer who created beauty from pain, a human being who suffered greatly and thought deeply about that suffering. That is enough, that is everything. The last word belongs to him. From a notebook, 1882, the summer he lost Lou. I assess the power of a will by how much resistance, pain, torture it endures and knows how to turn to its advantage. I do not account the evil and painful character of existence as an objection to it, but hope instead that one day it will be more evil and painful than it has ever been. He got his wish. His final years were more painful than anything he imagined, but whether he turned them to advantage, we cannot know. The silence that followed tells us nothing, or perhaps it tells us everything, that some pain cannot be overcome, that some fates cannot be loved, that some questions have no answers except the questions themselves. And that is the final teaching, not the Übermensch, not the eternal recurrence, not the death of God, but this: we are human completely, irreducibly, tragically human, and no philosophy can change that. He learned this in Turin. We can learn it from his life, and perhaps that knowledge, painful as it is the beginning of wisdom.